So what's been happening in Gideon's story? Just to recap, he has been chosen by God to defeat the Midianites, and he's in pursuit, we read in this passage, of the last two kings of the Midianites, Zebah and Zalmunna. He's tracing them with his army of 300, and he comes to two Israelite communities, the communities of Sukkoth and Peniel, and they don't want anything to do with him. So he says, well, I'm going to come back and I'm going to exact vengeance on you both. So he goes off, he captures the two Midianite kings, he brings them back, he shows them off, he says, yeah, I have got them. He then kills the two kings and he devastates these two Israelite communities. It seems that Gideon goes beyond what God has asked him to do. It's not very clear whether Gideon is being asked by God to pursue these last two Midianite kings, but he does it anyway, in God's name. And it's a shocking contrast. He's turned from being this hero to a villain. His army has gone from being liberators to a hit squad. They've gone from killing the enemy, the Midianites, to killing their fellow Israelites. The question we want to ask, and hopefully try and answer this morning, is how do you remain a good leader? You can start out as a good leader, but it seems like too few don't continue to be good leaders in whatever sphere we're thinking of, whether that's church leadership or politics or business or governance. One of my favorite films of all time is The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight at one point has a group of people talking in a restaurant about leadership and when and how to hand over power. And one of the characters says, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. When we look at our politicians, and whether it's politicians in this country or politicians in other countries, when we think about church leaders, either here or in America, it's a mixed story, isn't it? You might think of certain politicians who've started out well, who've been elected and done great things, and they've got the people behind them, and then over time, it goes a bit wrong. Or we think about church leaders, perhaps those, particularly in America, who oversee large megachurches, but it does happen in this country as well, where you've got leaders who start out, they grow a great church, and that's seen as success. You judge it by how well it's going and how good they are, by the numbers of people who come to the church. Loads of people's lives are impacted, loads of people who come to faith, but then a scandal breaks. Started out as a hero, and they become the villain. And a leader is faced with two options. One is to step down, and the other option is to continue in leadership. But the problem with longevity in leadership is there's greater propensity for things going wrong. Richard suggested that there are two tests in leadership. The first test Gideon underwent when he was won over by God into a position of leadership. And Gideon, as we know, wrestled with this, but God managed to get him to a point of winning a victory for the Israelites. But there's a second test, which is how are you going to proceed once you're behind a victory? Because the danger is when we have a victory, we become self-confident and we think that we can achieve anything. We think that God is calling us to greater things. We think that God wants us to stay in that position of leadership for as long as possible. It's the most important test in leadership. We're called to turn to God, to enter into greater surrender to God. What the writer of Judges and what we'd all like to see happen in Gideon's life is Gideon to surrender his life more and more to God. But Gideon didn't do that, did he? He didn't do that. He chose the other way, which is to have a self-focused leadership, to build a dynasty so that his family may prosper, to amass riches, to become almost like a king, to establish his power so that he'd have it for as long as possible to the end of his life. Greater surrender to God means that we establish boundaried leadership. It means that we put boundaries upon ourselves, or we allow others to put boundaries around us so that we don't amass too much power. But Gideon chose to go for unfettered power. He can do more of what he wants in an unaccountable way for as long as he wants. Here's the thing, all leaders are ambiguous. As we read the last few verses of the Judges' account of his life, it has a favorable account of Gideon, And I find that really hard. Because maybe you're like me. Maybe you like your heroes to be cut and dry, black and white. Maybe you like them to be really clearly heroic. Or maybe you like people to be really clearly villainous. But the writer of Judges says, no, Gideon, actually, he did some great stuff. He led the people in 40 years of peace. There were no more Midianites, no more invasions. And the people, the writer of the Judges says, should have honored Gideon more than they did. All leaders are ambiguous. Those of us who are leaders, it's important to realize that we are flawed and we will get it wrong from time to time. And those of us who work with leaders, those of us who work in organizations, we're called to work with wisdom. We're called to know when to challenge bad leadership. We're called to know when to step away and maybe move on to another place of work. We're called to know when to work tirelessly with our leaders to help them be better leaders. But of course, Jesus is the only unflawed leader. Jesus is the one who gets it right. Jesus is the one who passed both tests. He surrenders his life more and more to God, and he says, Lord, take my life. Here I am. I give it to you, Lord. Lead me on to greater victory, or show me how to step down. So whatever we're called to do, we all have a role to play to help our leaders be good leaders, and to pray that our good leaders remain good leaders for however long God has got them in their position of power and authority.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free. Oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am.